A skull found in Peru holds secrets that could rewrite human history. These are the Paracas skulls, and their bizarre, elongated shapes are just the beginning of a deeper genetic mystery. By the end of this exploration, you will see the ancient story of the Americas in a completely new light. What do controversial DNA tests reveal about these remains, and why do their very bones ignite such fierce debate among experts? What does it truly mean to be human in a world still full of ancient surprises? The year was 1928, a time when archaeology often meant uncovering treasures for museums rather than solving profound human mysteries. Giulio Tello, a man whose own indigenous heritage fueled a deep passion for Peru's past, was surveying the arid Paracas Peninsula. What he found there was not a single grave, but an entire city of silence, a vast necropolis hidden beneath the coastal sands. His team began to carefully uncover bundles, hundreds of them, each one a cocoon of ancient cloth. The textiles were breathtaking, woven with vibrant colors and complex patterns that had survived the centuries, speaking of a sophisticated culture with incredible artistry. Yet when these bundles were opened, the contents presented a puzzle that overshadowed even the finest fabric. The skulls within were dramatically, unnaturally elongated, stretching back from the forehead in a smooth, tapering curve. Tello was familiar with cranial deformation, a practice observed in various ancient societies where infant skulls were gently bound with boards or cloth to create a desired shape, often a symbol of status or beauty. But as he examined these Paracas specimens more closely, something did not align. The deformation was so extreme, and the skulls themselves seemed to possess a physical weight and volume that simple binding of a soft infant's head could not fully explain. The brow ridges, the placement of the foramen magnum, the hole where the spinal cord connects, all appeared subtly different. In that moment, under the relentless Peruvian sun, Giulio Tello realized he had not just found a burial ground. He had stumbled upon a question carved in bone and wrapped in exquisite cloth, waiting centuries for someone to ask it. Who were these people, and why did they go to such lengths to reshape not just their society, but their very physical forms? This was the first thread pulled, the beginning of a mystery that would slowly unravel, leading far beyond the desert sands into the very code of life itself. The mystery deepens when we look past the cloth wrappings and examine the bone itself. For decades, the accepted explanation was a cultural one, a practice known as cranial deformation. In many ancient societies, from the Maya to certain tribes along the Nile, it was common to gently shape an infant's soft skull by binding it with boards or cloth. This created a distinctive, elongated head shape that became a permanent marker of beauty, status, or even a connection to the divine. It was a cultural signature, a way for a community to literally mold its identity. And for a long time, this seemed to be the full story for the Paracas skulls as well. But a closer look reveals details that simply do not fit that neat explanation. The reshaping achieved by binding is external, like molding clay around a core. The core itself, the skull's fundamental architecture, remains human. Yet several researchers examining the Paracas specimens have pointed to features that suggest the core itself might be different. One of the most technical, yet telling, points of analysis is the foramen magnum. That is the Latin term for the large opening at the base of your skull where your spinal cord connects to your brain. In a typical human skull, this hole is positioned toward the back. In some of the Paracas skulls, however, studies indicate it is situated further forward, toward the center of the skull base. This is not something that can be changed by wrapping a baby's head. It is a foundational feature of skeletal anatomy. Then there is the matter of sheer mass. While measurements vary, some of these skulls are reported to possess a cranial volume up to 25% greater than the average modern human, and they are significantly heavier. Think of it this way: if binding were the only factor, you would have a reshaped skull with the same internal capacity. Like stretching a balloon, it gets longer but holds the same amount of air. But if the container itself is fundamentally larger and heavier from the start, that suggests the possibility of a different underlying structure, perhaps even a different brain. This is where the speculation and the controversy truly ignites. If these anatomical differences are genuine, then what are we looking at? Could this be evidence of a forgotten human lineage, a branch of our family tree that developed in isolation in the Americas with distinct physical traits? Or does it point to something even more extraordinary, the remains of a separate hominid species, a different kind of human, that once walked alongside the ancestors we know? These are not questions about fashion or ritual. They are questions about the very blueprint of who we are, written in a language of bone that we are only just beginning to decipher. Then came a claim so extraordinary it threatened to shatter the entire conversation. In 2014, a researcher named Brian Forrester, known for his work with the skulls, announced the results of preliminary genetic testing. The samples, he stated, had been analyzed by an unnamed geneticist, and the findings were unlike anything on record. The report focused on mitochondrial DNA, a specific type passed down through the maternal line, often used to trace deep ancestral lineages. According to the announcement, the DNA sequences contained mutations that were completely unknown. They did not match any human lineage, past or present. They did not match any primate. Astonishingly, the claim went further, stating the sequences could not be linked to any animal species currently listed in GenBank, the United States National Institutes of Health's massive, comprehensive genetic database. The implication was staggering. If true, it meant this was not a case of unusual human anatomy. This was evidence of something entirely separate, a human-like species with no known place on our existing tree of life. For those fascinated by historical mysteries, it was a moment of validation, seeming to prove that mainstream science had missed a fundamental chapter of our story. For mainstream anthropologists and geneticists, it was a shockwave, an assertion that demanded either a revolutionary acceptance or a rigorous debunking. The skulls were instantly reframed. They were no longer just archaeological artifacts or examples of cultural practice. They were now potential biological outliers, physical evidence that could force a radical rewrite of human history in the Americas, and perhaps the entire narrative of our evolution. The quiet academic debate erupted into a public firestorm, setting the stage for a fierce and ongoing battle over evidence, methodology, and the very nature of scientific truth. A scientific earthquake demands scientific proof. The initial genetic claims about the Paracas skulls sent shockwaves through the public, but within the halls of academia, the reaction was one of profound and immediate caution. Extraordinary claims, as the famous saying goes, require extraordinary evidence, and for many leading anthropologists and geneticists, the evidence presented simply did not meet the rigorous standards required to rewrite a chapter of human history. The criticisms were swift and pointed, forming a wall of skepticism built on established scientific protocol. First was the issue of publication. The findings were announced to the world through press releases and documentaries, not through a peer-reviewed paper in a respected scientific journal. Peer review is the essential checkpoint of modern science, where other experts in the field scrutinize the methods, data, and conclusions before they are accepted as credible. By bypassing this process, the claims existed in a kind of limbo, fascinating but unverified. Then there was the shadow over the testing itself. The geneticist and the laboratory involved were not publicly named, making it impossible for other scientists to evaluate their credentials, their methods, or to attempt to replicate the results. Replication is the cornerstone of scientific discovery. If a finding is true, other researchers should be able to follow the same steps and achieve the same outcome. Anonymity in this context acted as a barrier to that essential verification. Perhaps the most significant concern raised was the very real possibility of contamination. Ancient DNA is incredibly fragile and notoriously difficult to work with. Modern human DNA from archaeologists, handlers, or even dust in the air can easily infiltrate a sample, corrupting the results. For a finding as monumental as unknown, non-human DNA, every step of collection and analysis must occur under the strictest sterile conditions, often in dedicated clean room labs. There were serious questions about whether the skull samples tested had been excavated and handled with this level of forensic care from the very beginning. Leading voices in physical anthropology like Dr. John Verano of Chilean University, who has extensive experience with Andean remains, offered a more grounded interpretation. He and others stress that unusual physical form does not automatically mean alien or unknown ancestry. Human populations show remarkable natural variation in skeletal features. More importantly, the long-term physical effects of deliberate cranial deformation on a growing infant are still not fully understood. The binding process could potentially influence the development of certain skull sutures and bone plates in ways that go beyond simple shape, creating anatomical quirks that might look foreign to us today. This clash is not merely a disagreement over data, it represents a fundamental tension in the pursuit of knowledge. On one side is the drive for exploration, the desire to chase bold, paradigm-shifting possibilities that lie outside established textbooks. On the other is the discipline of rigorous protocol, the slow, meticulous process of testing, doubting, and verifying that protects science from error and pseudoscience. The Paracas skulls now sit squarely in the middle of this tug-of-war. Their silence forms a testing ground for how we distinguish a world-changing discovery from a compelling historical mystery still waiting for its definitive proof. The idea of reshaping a child's head may seem startling to us today, yet across the ancient world, it was a profound expression of identity. To truly grasp what might have happened in Paracas, we need to step back and see this practice on a global stage, where it was not an anomaly, but a deeply rooted human tradition. From the towering temples of the Maya to the island communities of Vanuatu, and even among certain groups in ancient France, the deliberate shaping of infant skulls was a widespread cultural custom. This was not a random act, but a deliberate process beginning when a baby was just a few days old. The soft, pliable bones of the skull, with their open sutures, were gently pressed and bound with padded boards or tight cloth wrappings. Over months and years, this constant, subtle pressure would guide the growing skull into a new, permanent form, often a dramatic, elongated silhouette that tapered back from the forehead. Why would communities do this? The reasons were woven into the very fabric of their societies. In many cultures, an elongated head was a visible, undeniable mark of high social status, setting the nobility apart from the common people from their very first breath. For others, it was an ideal of beauty, a physical manifestation of grace and refinement. Perhaps most powerfully, it served as a marker of group identity. Your head shape instantly announced your people, your lineage, and your place in the world. Some even believed it brought them closer to the divine, creating a physical resemblance to gods or ancestors who were depicted with similar features. This global context is absolutely vital. It shows us that the human body has long been a canvas for cultural meaning, and that our ancestors possessed both the knowledge and the will to alter their physical forms in pursuit of social and spiritual ideals. The results could be incredibly dramatic, producing skulls that, to an untrained eye, look almost otherworldly. This well-documented history provides a powerful, human-centric explanation. It reminds us that before we leap to theories of unknown lineages or lost species, we must first fully consider the incredible, tangible power of cultural practice. The families of Paracas were likely participating in a tradition that connected them to a much larger human story, one written not in mystery, but in the deliberate, careful hands of parents shaping the future of their children. Yet even against this global backdrop, the skulls from the Paracas Desert continue to whisper that their story might be different. Proponents of their unique nature point to a series of subtle but persistent distinctions that set them apart from other examples of cultural shaping found around the world. It is not merely the dramatic elongation, though many Paracas specimens do exhibit an exceptionally severe taper. The argument centers on the underlying architecture of the bone itself, features that binding alone may not adequately explain. When compared to the carefully shaped skulls of other cultures, such as the Kalogwa people from the highlands of Peru or the Mangbitu of Central Africa, certain Paracas examples seem to stand out. Researchers note differences in the cranial volume, the internal capacity of the skull, which in some cases appears larger. They also point to variations in the suture patterns, the zigzag seams where the bony plates of the skull fuse together. These sutures can be influenced by growth and pressure, but their specific configuration in some Paracas skulls is cited as unusual. So what does this collection of details suggest? One compelling interpretation is that the people of Paracas were indeed practicing cranial deformation, but they were applying this cultural practice to a population that may have already possessed a distinct biological starting point. Perhaps through generations of isolation or unique evolutionary pressures, this group naturally developed a slightly different cranial structure, a genetic predisposition that was then dramatically accentuated by the binding ritual. Another possibility is that their technique was uniquely intensive, beginning at an exceptionally early stage of infancy and applying consistent pressure that pushed the biological limits of what the human skull could be molded to do. This would not require an unknown lineage, but rather an extreme mastery of a known cultural practice, driven by a powerful social or spiritual imperative to achieve a specific, striking form. This distinction is crucial. It moves the conversation from a simple either-or debate into a more nuanced exploration of interaction. It asks us to consider how biology and culture can intertwine, how a community's deepest beliefs might physically reshape not just one generation, but potentially influence the perception of their remains for centuries to come. The mystery then becomes not solely about what they were, but about the incredible lengths to which they went to become what they wanted to be. The storm of controversy demanded a clearer path forward. In the years following the initial explosive claims, a more measured attempt to solve the genetic puzzle began to take shape. The goal was no longer just to find an answer, but to build a case that could withstand the intense scrutiny of the scientific community. This effort came to a head in 2018, when a documented investigation sent a sample from one of the Paracas skulls to a reputable laboratory at Lakehead University in Canada. The process was filmed, bringing a new level of transparency to the inquiry. When the results came back, they painted a picture far more complex than a simple yes or no. The DNA analysis did not reveal an unknown, non-human species. Instead, it showed a strong, clear connection to Native American ancestry. This was a crucial finding, firmly rooting these individuals within the broad human family that populated the Americas. Yet, the report did not end there. Alongside this recognizable genetic signature were fragments, markers within the mitochondrial DNA that did not match any known contemporary or ancient population. They were unusual, unidentifiable pieces in an otherwise familiar puzzle. This nuanced result shifted the narrative dramatically. It moved the conversation away from sensational claims of a separate species and toward a different, equally fascinating possibility. Perhaps the people of Paracas were not alien but profoundly isolated. their community may have descended from one of the very earliest waves of migration into the Americas, a group that branched off and developed in seclusion for thousands of years, accumulating unique genetic mutations along the way. Over time, through later migrations, conflict, or intermarriage, this distinct lineage could have been absorbed and diluted, vanishing from the modern gene pool. The elongated skulls, then, might be the physical manifestation of this lost lineage, a ghost population whose only remaining whispers are these unusual bone structures and those few, stubborn genetic markers that refuse to be easily classified. They become not a mystery from another world, but a poignant echo from the deepest layers of our own human story in the Americas, a story still being pieced together one fragile strand of DNA at a time. But the search for truth in ancient DNA is a hunt for ghosts in a world full of living fingerprints. To understand why the genetic claims remain so hotly debated, we must confront the single greatest obstacle in this entire field: the silent, invisible problem of contamination. Imagine trying to listen to a faint, centuries-old whisper in a crowded, noisy room. That is the fundamental challenge scientists face when testing remains like the Paracas skulls. These artifacts have not been resting undisturbed in their desert tombs since their discovery nearly 100 years ago. They have been excavated, handled, measured, photographed, and stored by countless individuals over decades. Every touch, every breath in a museum storage room, even dust particles in the air, carries modern human DNA. This contemporary genetic material is fresh, abundant, and robust, while the authentic ancient DNA inside the bone is incredibly fragmented and degraded. In a sample that is not meticulously collected and processed, the modern DNA doesn't just mix in. It completely overwhelms the ancient signal, like a spotlight drowning out a candle. The result can be a genetic profile that looks modern, or worse, a confusing, unrepeatable chimera of ancient and modern traces that leads to false conclusions. This is why the methodology is everything. Reputable laboratories dedicated to ancient DNA operate like forensic clean rooms. Researchers wear full body suits, masks, and gloves, working in positively pressurized environments to keep external contaminants out. They don't just scrape any surface of the bone, they carefully extract a sample from the densest part, the petrous bone of the inner ear, which is more sealed and protected from the environment over millennia. Even then, the work is not done. They run extensive controlled tests alongside the sample, checking every reagent and piece of equipment for background DNA, and they sequence the sample multiple times to distinguish true ancient patterns from random modern noise. When early claims about the Paracas skulls emerged, a central point of skepticism within the scientific community was the lack of transparency around this exact process. Were the samples taken with this level of sterile, controlled care from the very moment of excavation, or were they collected after years of handling in non-laboratory settings? Without a documented chain of custody and rigorous anti-contamination protocols, any extraordinary genetic result becomes extraordinarily difficult to trust. This isn't about dismissing possibilities, it is about upholding the strict standards necessary to hear that ancient whisper clearly, without the deafening static of the present. For the mystery of the Paracas skulls to ever be solved at a genetic level, the evidence must first pass through this unforgiving filter of modern science. So where does a mystery go when science offers no definitive answer? It often drifts into the realm of imagination, where the gaps in our knowledge are filled with stories of cosmic wonder. The Paracas skulls, with their otherworldly appearance and unresolved genetic questions, have become a perfect canvas for such speculation. For decades, they have been a favorite subject within the world of alternative history, most famously tied to the ancient astronaut hypothesis popularized by authors like Erich von Däniken. In this captivating narrative, the elongated skulls are not a product of human culture or an isolated lineage, but something far more extraordinary. they are presented as potential evidence of extraterrestrial beings who visited Earth in the distant past. Within this framework, the skulls are interpreted in two compelling ways. First, they could be the actual physical remains of these visitors, beings whose natural biology included an elongated cranium. Second, and perhaps more intriguingly, the cultural practice of head binding itself is reimagined. It becomes not just a mark of status, but a profound act of imitation. Ancient peoples, having encountered these advanced star travelers they perceived as gods, might have begun reshaping their children's heads in a deliberate attempt to emulate their celestial teachers, to literally mold themselves in the image of the divine. This idea taps into a deep and powerful human impulse, the desire to connect our origins to something greater, to solve our oldest puzzles with the most dramatic answers possible. It transforms the Paracas Peninsula from an archaeological site into a potential landing strip in a forgotten interstellar saga. Mainstream academia, of course, roundly dismisses these theories as pseudoscience, pointing out the complete lack of empirical evidence and the reliance on speculative leaps over methodological rigor. Historians and archaeologists emphasize that every element of the Paracas finds, from the textiles to the burial methods, fits within a comprehensible human cultural context, even if some details remain puzzling. Yet, to focus solely on debunking misses the larger point of why these alternative narratives hold such enduring appeal. They thrive not in spite of the gaps in our understanding, but because of them. When official history cannot provide a complete and satisfying explanation for something as visually striking as these skulls, the human mind instinctively seeks a story that can. These theories demonstrate how ancient mysteries act as mirrors, reflecting our own timeless questions about where we come from and whether we are alone in the universe. The fascination with the Paracas skulls, therefore, becomes a dialogue between two ways of knowing, one built on careful excavation of the earth and the other on the boundless excavation of human wonder. The true meaning of the elongated skulls is woven into the very fabric of Paracas life. To see them as mere oddities is to miss their profound role in a society of remarkable sophistication. For centuries, roughly from 800 BCE to 100 BCE, the Paracas people flourished on the arid Peruvian coast, mastering their harsh environment. Their legacy is not written on paper but in the ground and in thread. They etched massive geoglyphs, sprawling line drawings on the desert floor, perhaps for ceremonial purposes or as markers for the heavens. But their most breathtaking achievement was in textiles. The cloth found in their tombs is considered some of the finest in the ancient world, woven with impossibly complex patterns and vibrant, lasting dyes that depict gods, animals, and geometric forms. This was a culture with deep spiritual beliefs, advanced artistic skill, and a clear social structure, and the elongated skulls were an integral part of that structure. The individuals buried with these shaped heads were almost always accompanied by greater wealth. Their funerary bundles contained more of those exquisite textiles, precious ornaments, and ceremonial objects. This tells a clear story. The practice of cranial deformation was not for everyone. It was a privilege, a visible and permanent sign of elevated status. From infancy, a child destined for leadership, priesthood, or nobility would have their head bound, their very body molded to reflect their role. As they grew, that distinctive silhouette would have been an unmistakable badge of authority, setting them apart in life and honoring them in death. The elongation was far more than a fashion or a curious ritual. It was a living symbol, a physical manifestation of power, identity, and a connection to the divine within a complex, hierarchical world. To understand these skulls, we must look past the bone and see the person, the culture, and the powerful social meaning they carried from their first breath to their final, richly wrapped resting place. To place the Paracas skulls in their proper context, we must look far beyond the Peruvian desert. Across the ancient world, from the shores of the Black Sea to the islands of the Mediterranean, communities were engaging in the same profound practice of reshaping the human form. This global phenomenon is what makes the Paracas case so compelling and so complex. In the highlands of Peru itself, at a site known as the Chongo's Necropolis, archaeologists have uncovered skulls with dramatic, intentional deformation. Far across the world, on the island of Malta, prehistoric burial sites have yielded what are often called the conehead skulls, displaying a striking vertical elongation. Similarly, in the Crimean Peninsula, evidence of cranial shaping has been found among ancient Scythian and other groups. On the surface, this seems to reinforce a simple explanation that the Paracas finds are just one more example of a widespread human custom. Yet a closer, comparative look reveals a world of subtle but significant difference. The technique used matters greatly. In many cultures, including some in Crimea, the binding was often circumferential, wrapping around the head to create a more rounded, tower-like shape. The famous Malta skulls, by contrast, show evidence of a method that applied pressure primarily to the front and back, resulting in that distinctive, steep, almost conical vertical rise. The intent behind the practice also varied. For some, it was purely a marker of aristocracy. For others, it held deep religious significance, a way to emulate deities depicted with elongated heads. For still others, it was a simple, localized ideal of beauty. This global catalog allows anthropologists to map a spectrum of human behavior. They can trace how the method of binding influenced the final shape and how cultural meaning was physically inscribed onto bone. When we place the Paracas skulls onto this map, the questions become more precise. Does their specific, severe horizontal elongation, with that smooth backward taper, fit neatly within the known range of techniques and results seen worldwide? Or do their additional physical characteristics, like the reported cranial volume and suture patterns, push them beyond the boundaries of this spectrum? This comparative analysis does not seek to diminish the mystery of Paracas, but to refine it. By understanding what was common to humanity, we can better identify what might be unique to one people. It frames the central enigma not as a solitary oddity, but as a focal point in a much larger story of human diversity, challenging us to discern where cultural expression ends and biological distinctiveness might possibly begin. The human body possesses a remarkable capacity for adaptation, even in its earliest days. To truly understand how a society could reshape its children's physical forms, we need to look beneath the skin, to the very mechanics of a growing infant's skull. It is not a solid, rigid helmet of bone. Instead, it is an intricate, dynamic puzzle designed for growth. At birth, the skull is composed of several separate bony plates, like the pieces of a jigsaw. These plates are connected by soft, fibrous joints called sutures, and between them are larger gaps of membrane known as fontanelles, the soft spots you can gently feel on a baby's head. This flexible, open structure serves a vital purpose. It allows the skull to compress slightly during birth, and more importantly, it provides the room for the brain, which will triple in size during the first 2 years of life, to expand rapidly. This period of incredible growth and plasticity is the key to the entire practice of cranial deformation. By applying gentle, constant pressure to specific areas of the skull during this critical window, caregivers could guide the direction of that growth. The growing brain pushes outward, but the bound areas resist, directing the bony plates to expand along the path of least resistance. If pressure is applied to the front and back, the skull elongates forward and backward. If it is wrapped circumferentially, it grows taller. This was not a quick or painful process, but a slow, steady molding that took place over months and often years, beginning just days after birth. The result was a permanent, lifelong alteration of the skull's architecture, a testament to the profound interplay between culture and biology. And crucially, this reshaping of the container did not diminish what was inside. The brain, in its incredible adaptability, simply grew to fill the new, unusual space. There is no evidence to suggest that individuals with intentionally shaped skulls experienced impaired intelligence or cognitive function. Their minds developed fully within their uniquely sculpted homes. This biological reality transforms the practice from a mysterious or shocking act into a sophisticated understanding of human development. It shows a society that recognized a fundamental truth about our species. Our bodies are not fixed at birth, but are, to a surprising degree, a collaboration between our innate biology and the cultural world that shapes us. The elongated skulls of Paracas, then, are not just symbols of status, they are physical proof of this ancient, intimate knowledge. Another possibility whispers from the medical textbooks, a path of inquiry that looks not to the stars or to ritual, but to the body itself. Could the unusual shape of these skulls be the result not of culture, but of illness? Science must always consider this, for certain genetic or developmental conditions can dramatically alter cranial form. One condition often mentioned is hydrocephalus, where an excess of cerebrospinal fluid accumulates within the brain's ventricles. The pressure from this fluid can, especially in a growing child, cause the skull bones to separate and the head to enlarge, sometimes taking on a rounded, disproportionately large appearance. Other rare syndromes can also influence skull growth, leading to unusual proportions. It is a sobering, human-centered line of thought, one that shifts the narrative from intentional design to unintended circumstance. Yet when held against the evidence from Paracas, this explanation, while important to rule out, begins to fray at the edges. Conditions like hydrocephalus are typically accompanied by distinct skeletal markers that specialists can identify. More importantly, such significant health challenges in ancient times would have almost certainly been associated with severe developmental impacts and a greatly shortened lifespan. The individuals found in the Paracas necropolis tell a different story. These are not the fragile remains of those who faced immense hardship. They are robust adults buried with great care and accompanied by objects of clear value and status. Their resting places speak of honor, not tragedy. This is the crucial distinction. While it is possible, even likely, that an individual skull within the hundreds discovered might show signs of a pathological condition, illness cannot account for the widespread, consistent, and culturally integrated practice seen across the entire site. A disease does not carefully select only the children of the elite, nor does it produce a standardized, aesthetically deliberate shape that becomes a badge of identity for generations. To explain the Paracas phenomenon as solely a matter of health is to overlook the deliberate pattern woven into their society. It dismisses the agency of a people who clearly made conscious choices about their bodies and their world. The exploration of pathology, therefore, serves a vital purpose. It acts as a process of elimination, helping researchers narrow the field of possibilities. By seriously considering and then setting aside this medical avenue, the focus returns ever more sharply to the interplay of human will, biology, and the profound desire to shape one's own destiny in a form that would endure long after the last thread was woven. Beyond the scientific debate lies a far more human question, one of respect and rightful ownership. These elongated skulls are not merely artifacts or biological specimens. They are the ancestral remains of indigenous Peruvian people, individuals who lived, loved, and were laid to rest by a community with deep spiritual beliefs. This reality places a profound ethical weight on every decision made about them, from DNA extraction to public display. In recent decades, a powerful movement has challenged the traditional practices of archaeology and anthropology, asking, who truly has the right to study these remains? For many indigenous groups and their allies, the answer is clear. The descendants of those who created the culture hold that authority. When researchers from outside the community conduct tests or put sacred objects on view in distant museums without clear, informed consent, it is seen as a continuation of a painful history, a form of scientific colonialism that treats cultural heritage as a resource to be mined for data rather than a legacy to be honored. This ethical tension forces a difficult but necessary balance. On one side is the undeniable human drive for knowledge, the desire to solve historical puzzles that could reshape our understanding of the past. On the other is the fundamental principle of cultural sovereignty and the right of communities to protect and control how their ancestors are treated. This is not an abstract debate. It is reshaping the very foundations of modern archaeology. More institutions are now engaging in collaborative partnerships with descendant communities, involving them directly in research questions, methodology, and the care of remains. These conversations are often slow and complex, requiring mutual trust and a willingness to listen. They ask scientists to see beyond the day, to point to the person, and they ask communities to consider what knowledge responsibly sought might also mean for understanding their own history. For the Paracas skulls, this ethical landscape may be the most important frontier of all. Any future attempt to seek definitive genetic answers must first navigate this terrain of respect. The quest to solve an ancient mystery cannot responsibly proceed without honoring the living voices connected to that past, ensuring that the pursuit of knowledge strengthens cultural understanding rather than repeating the mistakes of history. The quiet hum of a modern CT scanner offers a different kind of excavation. While the debate swirls around genetics and cultural meaning, a new wave of research is turning to non-invasive technology to look inside the mystery, literally. High-resolution computed tomography scans, the same tools used in hospitals, are now being applied to the ancient skulls of Paracas. This process creates a detailed three-dimensional map of the bone, slice by virtual slice, without ever touching the fragile remains. From this data, researchers can construct incredibly precise digital models. One of the most powerful applications is the creation of a virtual endocast. As the brain grows inside the skull, it leaves a subtle imprint on the internal bone, like a mold. By digitally mapping the interior cavity, scientists can produce a three-dimensional model of the space the brain once occupied, revealing its general shape and proportions. This technology allows for exact measurements of cranial capacity, settling debates about volume with objective numbers. It can analyze bone density and thickness throughout the structure, and with perfect clarity, reveal the status of every cranial suture, those zigzag seams where the bony plates meet. This is crucial because it can show whether a suture fused prematurely due to binding pressure or perhaps a natural condition, or if it remained open, indicating a different growth pattern. Perhaps most importantly, these scans act as a powerful diagnostic tool, able to detect subtle signs of pathology, like the internal markers of hydrocephalus or other developmental conditions that might not be visible from the outside. Institutions like the Peruvian Ministry of Culture have begun collaborating on such studies, aiming to build a data-rich, objective profile of these remains. This represents a significant shift from speculation to metrics. By scanning both the Paracas skulls and examples of intentionally deformed skulls from other cultures, alongside skulls with no deformation, researchers can create a definitive comparative database. They can ask precise questions. Does the internal architecture of a Paracas skull fall within the expected range of variation caused by binding? Or do the digital models reveal structural signatures that truly set them apart? The answers are no longer a matter of visual interpretation or contested measurement. They are embedded in the code of the scan itself, waiting to be decoded. This technological path forward promises to cut through the noise of controversy, offering a clear-eyed, empirical view into the very heart of the enigma. The most compelling solution might lie in a forgotten chapter of our own human story. This is the lost lineage hypothesis, a theory that offers a middle ground between extraordinary claims and conventional explanations. It asks us to envision the peopling of the Americas not as a single event, but as a complex series of migrations, a story written in waves across thousands of years. Genetic research increasingly suggests that the first people to cross the ancient land bridge from Siberia did so not as one homogeneous group, but in distinct pulses, separated by centuries or even millennia. Some of these early groups may have traveled down the coast, finding refuge in isolated pockets like the Paracas Peninsula. Cut off from other populations, they would have evolved in genetic solitude. Over generations, the subtle forces of natural selection and genetic drift could have accentuated certain physical traits within this isolated community, perhaps leading to a slightly larger average cranial size or a distinct facial structure. This was not a different species, but a distinct human branch on the same vast family tree. Then, imagine a later wave of migration, a new group moving into the region. Contact would have occurred, leading to trade, conflict, and intermarriage. Over time, the unique genetic signature of that first, isolated group would have been diluted, absorbed into the larger, incoming population. Within a few centuries, their distinct DNA could have vanished from the living gene pool, like a stream merging into a great river. What would remain? The most persistent clues might be cultural practices, and most strikingly, the physical remains of their elite. The lost lineage theory proposes that the Paracas nobility could have been the last direct descendants of this founding population. Their distinctive elongated skulls, then, would represent a powerful convergence of biology and culture. They may have naturally possessed a cranial structure that was already somewhat distinct, and they then accentuated this difference through deliberate binding, transforming a biological heritage into a potent symbol of their ancient lineage and rightful authority. This idea elegantly reconciles the unusual anatomy with a purely human history. It requires no unknown DNA or visitors from the stars, only the recognition that the human journey is far more intricate and branched than we once believed. The elongated skulls become silent monuments to a lost people, a ghost lineage whose only remaining testament is the shape of their bones, a final echo of a journey that began at the very edge of the ancient world. The true genius of the Paracas people is not preserved in stone but in thread. When Giulio Tello's team carefully unwrapped the burial bundles, they discovered a treasure far more vibrant than the bones within. These were not simple shrouds, but monumental works of art, some over 10 feet long, and woven with a technical mastery that still astounds textile experts today. The fabrics are a riot of color, dyed with rich crimsons, deep blues, and radiant yellows derived from local plants and minerals, hues that have defied the centuries. The weaving techniques are phenomenally complex, employing hundreds of wefts per inch to create dense, tapestry-like surfaces. But it is the iconography, the stories told in fiber, that offers the most profound clues to the mystery of the skulls. The textiles are alive with imagery, swirling with depictions of mythical beings, supernatural animals, and anthropomorphic figures engaged in symbolic acts. And repeatedly woven into this sacred visual language are figures with distinctly elongated heads. This is the crucial connection. The skulls were not buried as isolated curiosities. They were the central figures in a complete cosmological package, wrapped in a visual manifesto of their culture's beliefs. The elongated heads on the textiles are not portrayed as strange or aberrant. They are depicted with power and reverence. These woven figures likely represent deified ancestors, cultural heroes who had transcended to a divine state, or perhaps even the gods themselves. For the Paracas elite, the practice of cranial deformation becomes a physical act of alignment with this sacred imagery. By shaping their children's heads, they were not just following a fashion, they were undertaking a profound ritual of transformation. They were molding the living body to mirror the ideal form of the powerful beings depicted in their art, actively seeking to incarnate the divine within their lineage. The bone shows us the how, but the thread reveals the why. It tells us that the elongated form was not merely a social marker, but a spiritual aspiration, a permanent bodily connection to a world of myth and power that defined their entire universe. To see a Paracas skull without its textile context is to see a sentence without its story, the final, silent proof of a belief system woven into the very fabric of their existence. Geography writes the first draft of culture. The Paracas Peninsula is a landscape of stark extremes, a narrow finger of desert jutting defiantly into the cold Pacific, cut off from the inland world by the vast, rainless expanse of the Ica Desert. To stand there is to feel a profound sense of isolation, a world bounded by endless ocean on one side and barren dunes on the other. This was not a crossroads of empires, but a secluded sanctuary, a natural cultural laboratory where a society could experiment and evolve with minimal interruption. In such a place, once a tradition takes root, it can grow in directions that would be impossible in a more connected, cosmopolitan setting. Imagine a village on a remote island, developing a unique dialect that over generations becomes its own language, or a community in a secluded valley perfecting a pottery style so distinct it becomes their signature. The Paracas Peninsula provided that same kind of creative solitude. Here, the practice of cranial deformation, once adopted, was not subject to the moderating influences of trade partners or conquering neighbors with different ideals of beauty. There was no outside pressure to conform, no fashionable trends drifting in from distant cities to dilute the tradition. Instead, it could intensify generation after generation, becoming more specialized, more refined, and perhaps more extreme. What might have begun as a modest symbol of status could, in this sealed environment, evolve into an elaborate and non-negotiable pillar of identity. The harsh environment itself may have even played a role. In a world where survival demanded strict social cohesion and clear hierarchies, a visible, permanent marker like an elongated skull could have become an essential social tool, instantly communicating an individual's place and lineage in a small, tightly knit world. This geographical context does not explain the origin of the practice, but it powerfully explains its persistence and its potential pinnacle. It shows us how a people shaped by their lonely and beautiful peninsula could in turn commit to shaping themselves with a dedication so complete that it would leave the modern world utterly captivated, forever wondering at the lengths they went to define who they were. Separating romanticized fiction from archaeological fact is a necessary step in this journey. A common image portrays every single Paracas skull as impossibly long and narrow, a uniform army of coneheads from the past. The reality within the necropolis is far more nuanced. There exists a spectrum of shapes, from moderately elongated forms to the most dramatic and famous specimens. This variation itself is revealing, suggesting the practice may have been applied with differing intensity or held different meanings across social strata, or even across different time periods within the Paracas culture itself. Not every member of the elite received, or perhaps desired, the most extreme modification. This range reminds us we are looking at a living, breathing society with individual choices, not a monolithic factory producing identical artifacts. Another persistent claim that requires clear addressing is the genetic one. Despite numerous documentaries and online articles, it is crucial to state that as of now, there exists no peer-reviewed, independently verified scientific study published in a major academic journal that confirms the presence of unknown, non-human DNA in these remains. The initial, sensational claims did not undergo the rigorous scrutiny of the scientific process, and subsequent, more transparent testing has pointed toward unusual but human ancestry, not extraterrestrial biology. This distinction is not meant to shut down curiosity, but to ground it in the available, verified evidence. We must also look backward in time to understand origins. The Paracas culture did not invent cranial deformation in a vacuum. Archaeological evidence from earlier Andean societies, such as the Chinchorro people along the coast and certain highland groups, shows they were experimenting with skull shaping centuries before Paracas flourished. The Paracas people likely inherited and then refined this tradition, pushing it to new artistic and symbolic heights, making it a central pillar of their elite identity. Perhaps the most seductive misconception links head shape directly to intellect. The idea that a larger cranial volume automatically housed a larger, more advanced brain is a tempting narrative, but modern neuroscience does not support it. Cognitive ability is tied to the complex organization of neural networks, the intricate folds and connections of the brain, not to its simple physical volume. Many animals have larger brains than humans, yet lack our cognitive faculties. Within our own species, there is no correlation between skull size and intelligence. Dispelling these myths is not an attempt to make the story less interesting, but to make it more genuinely profound. It clears away the speculative noise, allowing us to hear the true questions more clearly. We are left with the authentic mystery of a sophisticated culture that used profound bodily transformation to express power, spirituality, and identity, and the tantalizing possibility that their biological story may still hold unique chapters in the epic of human migration. This is where the real fascination lies, not in imagined visitors from the stars, but in the incredible, tangible achievements of an ancient people who shaped their world and themselves in ways that continue to captivate and challenge us. The path to a real answer is not a single test, but a careful, collaborative process. To move beyond speculation and toward a resolution that both science and the public can trust, a new kind of investigation is needed. This would be a multidisciplinary program built on transparency and ethical partnership from the very start. The first crucial step is selecting the right subjects. Researchers would need to identify a representative sample of skulls with pristine provenance, meaning their history is perfectly documented from the moment of excavation. These would be specimens that have been handled minimally and stored with the utmost care, offering the best chance for uncontaminated genetic material. Next, the most anticipated phase, the genetic analysis itself. This could not happen in just any lab. The samples would need to be sent to a top-tier, certified ancient DNA facility, one with a proven track record and the specialized clean room protocols to prevent modern contamination. Here, extraction and sequencing would be performed, but the work would not be done until every step, every piece of data, and every method is published openly for the global scientific community to review, replicate, and debate. In parallel, the very same specimens would undergo detailed osteological study and high-resolution CT scanning, building a complete digital and physical profile that links bone structure directly to any genetic findings. Yet none of this technical work holds legitimacy without the fourth foundational pillar, engaging in genuine, ongoing partnership with the indigenous communities of Peru. This means involving descendant groups from the beginning in conversations about research questions, the handling of remains, and the interpretation of results. It respects their cultural sovereignty and ensures the pursuit of knowledge strengthens understanding rather than repeating past harms. Only through this comprehensive, respectful, and open collaboration could we hope to find answers that satisfy rigorous science, honor cultural heritage, and finally bring clarity to a mystery that has captivated the world for generations. Ultimately, the significance of these skulls stretches far beyond a museum display or a genetic report. They represent a fundamental crossroads in how we understand the human story. Unraveling their truth forces us to question the very models we use to map our past. Consider the journey of ideas across continents. If the Paracas elongation is purely a cultural innovation, perfected in isolation, it asks us how such a profound practice might have traveled or emerged independently across the globe. Was it a shared human impulse, a solution different societies arrived at separately when grappling with concepts of divinity and power? Or does it hint at deeper, older connections between peoples we think of as separate, threads of contact now lost to time? On the other hand, if future research confirms a distinct biological lineage, the implications are even more profound. Our maps of how and when the Americas were populated are already being redrawn by new discoveries. A confirmed lost lineage would add a bold, new color to that map, revealing a branch of humanity that flourished and then faded, leaving only whispers in bone. This would challenge any simple, linear narrative of progress and settlement, replacing it with a story of diversity, adaptation, and complex intermingling. But perhaps the most powerful lesson lies not in choosing one answer over the other, but in holding both possibilities together. They reveal the incredible duality of the human experience. We are biological beings shaped by genetics and environment, and we are cultural beings capable of reshaping our very bodies to reflect our deepest beliefs. The Paracas people, whether through an act of intense cultural will or as the last bearers of a unique biological heritage, demonstrate this interplay in its most dramatic form. Their story, once solved, will not just tell us about one peninsula in Peru. It will deepen our appreciation for the breathtaking complexity of all pre-Columbian civilizations, societies that developed sophisticated worlds with their own rules, aesthetics, and understandings of what it means to be human. It reminds us that history is rarely a clean, single line from past to present. It is a vast, intricate tapestry, and we are only now beginning to trace all its threads, some vibrant and obvious, others faded and nearly forgotten, waiting for a careful hand to reveal their pattern once more. A mystery lies not just in the soil, but in the stories we tell about it. The Paracas skulls have transcended academic journals to become a fixture of popular imagination, a testament to how a compelling question can captivate millions. This journey from desert tomb to digital screen reveals a fascinating dance between rigorous science and irresistible narrative. For decades, television documentaries and best-selling books have brought these elongated forms into living rooms around the world, often framing them with thrilling music and provocative questions about lost civilizations or ancient visitors. Online forums buzz with theories, each thread weaving new layers of speculation onto the ancient bones. In this space, the most sensational angles naturally rise to the top because they speak to a deep and universal human desire, the longing for our history to be more extraordinary than the textbooks suggest. This public fascination, while sometimes blurring the line between hypothesis and fantasy, has played an undeniable and complex role. It has generated a persistent global curiosity that, in turn, has helped channel attention and even funding toward legitimate archaeological work in Peru. The public's hunger for answers creates a pressure and an opportunity for researchers. It pushes scientists and historians to step into the spotlight, to translate their meticulous findings into language that resonates, and to directly address the big, beautiful questions that the public is already asking. This dynamic creates a vital feedback loop. A documentary's provocative claim might prompt a university to launch a new, more rigorous study to provide a clearer answer. A viral online debate can highlight which aspects of the mystery the public finds most compelling, guiding future research priorities. In this way, the storytelling, even when it stretches the facts, serves a purpose. It keeps the conversation alive, ensuring that a puzzle from a remote peninsula never fades into obscurity, but remains a living question that challenges both our understanding of the past and our skill in communicating its truths. The threads of this mystery are woven not just into cloth and bone, but into the oldest stories humanity has ever told. Across continents and centuries, a recurring figure emerges from myth, a being of wisdom and power distinguished by an unmistakably elongated head. In ancient Egypt, the great god Osiris, ruler of the afterlife and judge of the dead, was frequently depicted wearing the Eight crown, a tall, white headdress that created a stark, vertical silhouette, symbolizing his supreme authority and connection to the celestial realm. Far to the east, in the clay tablets of Mesopotamia, there are tales of the Apkallu, 7 sages of immense knowledge who are said to have emerged from the sea to bring civilization to humanity. These figures are often shown in art with distinctly elongated craniums, marking them as beings set apart, bearers of divine wisdom. And in the very heart of the Andes, the creator god Viracocha, who shaped the world and its people, is described in some traditions as possessing a long head, a physical trait that connected him to order and genesis. This pattern is too widespread to ignore. It raises a tantalizing question. Are these simply archetypal symbols, a universal artistic shorthand for intelligence and otherworldliness, much like a halo in Christian art signifies sanctity? Or could they be something more, distant cultural memories echoing down through generations? One possibility is that these myths preserve a faint recollection of ancient cultural practices. If real leaders or priests once shaped their heads to signify a connection to the gods, stories about those gods might naturally inherit the same physical trait. Over time, the memory of the human practice fades, but the divine image with its elongated head remains. Another, more speculative thought wonders if the myths themselves inspired the practice. Did ancient peoples, hearing legends of long-headed gods, seek to emulate that sacred form in their own children, hoping to bring a piece of the divine into their community? This exploration does not provide a scientific answer, but it adds a profound layer of meaning. It suggests that the elongated form has resonated in the human psyche for millennia, transcending any single culture. Whether as symbol or memory, these global stories remind us that the Paracas skulls are part of a much larger tapestry of human wonder, a physical manifestation of an idea that has captivated our imagination since we first began to tell stories about where we came from and who might have walked among us. Every discovery is also a race against time. The Paracas skulls, having survived for over 2,000 years in the dry desert sands, now face a more insidious threat in the modern world. Once removed from their stable, arid tomb, these ancient remains become incredibly vulnerable to the very environment that now preserves them: humidity, light, and even the air itself. For the museums and institutions in Peru entrusted with their care, this presents a profound and ongoing challenge. Their mission is not merely to display history, but to safeguard it for future generations, ensuring these fragile artifacts survive long enough for science to develop the tools that may finally solve their mystery. This silent, meticulous work of conservation is the unsung foundation upon which all future investigation depends. It begins with the most basic yet critical defense: climate control. The skulls are kept in specialized storage areas where temperature and humidity are constantly monitored and regulated. A sudden spike in moisture can encourage mold growth on the bone or the mineral salts within to crystallize, causing the surface to crack and flake away. Even exposure to light, particularly the ultraviolet rays in sunlight or standard museum lighting, can be damaging over time, causing the ancient bone and the precious textile wrappings to fade and become brittle. Physical handling is minimized to an absolute necessity, with researchers using gloves and supports to prevent the transfer of oils and acids from human skin, which can slowly degrade the material. When a skull requires stabilization, conservators undertake painstaking restoration work, using reversible adhesives and materials to gently secure loose fragments without altering the original artifact. Perhaps one of the most forward-thinking strategies is digital archiving. Through high-resolution three-dimensional scanning and photography, conservators are creating perfect virtual copies of each skull. These digital twins serve multiple vital purposes. They allow researchers from anywhere in the world to study minute details without the need to ship or handle the fragile originals. They provide a permanent record, an insurance policy against any future physical damage or loss, and they ensure that even if the bone itself must one day rest undisturbed, its data, its precise shape and structure, remains forever accessible for future scholars wielding technologies we cannot yet imagine. This conservation effort is a quiet testament to patience and foresight. It acknowledges a humbling truth that we are not just interpreters of the past, but its temporary guardians. The real secret of the Paracas skulls may not be revealed in our lifetime, but through this careful, dedicated work, we are passing the question intact to the scientists and storytellers of tomorrow. The story of these skulls is far more than an archaeological puzzle. It is a living case study in the very engine of discovery, the scientific process itself. That process is rarely a straight line from question to answer. Instead, it is a dynamic, often contentious cycle of observation, hypothesis, and relentless testing. The Paracas mystery illustrates this beautifully. It began with Giulio Tello's careful observation of an unusual physical form. From there, multiple hypotheses emerged. The mainstream explanation pointed to cultural deformation, a well-documented practice. Alternative proposals suggested everything from a lost human lineage to origins that stretched the imagination. Each of these ideas, whether conventional or fringe, served a critical purpose. They generated debate, and debate is the lifeblood of scientific progress. Skepticism is not a dismissal, but a demand for better evidence. When extraordinary claims were made about the skull's genetics, the immediate response from the scientific community was not blind acceptance or outright rejection, but a call for rigor. Where is the data? How was it collected? Can it be replicated? This pushback forced everyone involved to sharpen their tools and refine their questions. Anthropologists had to look more closely at comparative skeletal anatomy. Archaeologists re-examined burial contexts for clues about social hierarchy. The very discussion pushed for more advanced, non-destructive techniques like CT scanning to gather objective data. This is how science self-corrects and inches toward greater understanding, not by silencing curiosity, but by challenging it to prove itself. An unresolved mystery like this one plays a vital, if underappreciated, role. It acts as a persistent thorn, a question that refuses to be ignored, thereby compelling entire fields to improve their methodologies, defend their paradigms, and remain humble in the face of the past's complexity. The journey toward truth, it turns out, is just as important as the destination. Perhaps the greatest gift these silent forms offer is not an answer, but a mirror. As we stand before the enigma of the Paracas skulls, we are not just looking at ancient bone, we are confronting the very nature of our own curiosity. These remains challenge our modern desire for tidy, binary conclusions, forcing us to sit comfortably with a profound and humbling uncertainty. In a world saturated with instant information, their mystery endures as a quiet testament to the depth of the human past, a depth that resists easy categorization. They ask us to reconsider what we label as primitive, revealing instead a society of immense sophistication, one that wove cosmic meaning into cloth and etched identity directly onto the body. This was not a simplistic act, but a layered expression of power, spirituality, and belonging that we, from our distant vantage point, may never fully unravel. That very gap in our understanding is itself an invitation. It asks us to marvel at the breathtaking diversity of human experience, at the countless ways our species has answered fundamental questions about who we are and why we are here. The drive to physically shape a child's head speaks to a universal human impulse, the desire to mold our world and ourselves according to beliefs that anchor us in the cosmos. Whether through ritual, art, or social structure, we have always sought to imprint our deepest values onto the tangible reality around us. The people of Paracas did this with a stunning, literal permanence. Their legacy, therefore, transcends debate over lineage or technique. It becomes a poignant reminder of our shared human capacity for creating meaning, for building complex worlds of significance that, long after the voices have faded, still whisper to us across the desert of time, urging us to look deeper and wonder more broadly about the incredible story of us all. The genetic mystery of the Paracas skulls remains, for now, tantalizingly unsolved. It is a perfect blend of cultural intrigue and biological puzzle, a question that refuses to settle into a single, comfortable answer. Our journey has taken us from their silent discovery in the desert sands, through the storm of genetic controversy that promised to rewrite history, and across the vast landscape of global human practices that show us just how widespread the desire to reshape ourselves truly was. We have navigated the rigorous demands of modern science, the quiet, vital work of conservation, and the essential, respectful dialogue with the descendants of this ancient land. Each perspective, from the laboratory to the living community, adds a layer of understanding, yet the core enigma persists. Are these the remains of a forgotten branch of our human family, a lineage that walked its own path in isolation? Or do they represent the pinnacle of a cultural art form, a society that pushed a known practice to its most breathtaking extreme to forge an identity unlike any other? The evidence as it stands allows for both possibilities, and perhaps that is the most profound truth of all. These elongated skulls stand as powerful monuments not to a single answer, but to the enduring, layered mysteries of our shared past. They are a physical reminder that history is never a closed book. Its pages are still being turned, and new chapters await discovery with every technological advance and every shift in perspective. They challenge us to hold multiple truths at once, to appreciate the incredible sophistication of ancient cultures while remaining open to the surprising complexities of human biology and migration. If this exploration has reshaped your view of ancient America, if it has made you wonder about the countless other stories still woven into the earth, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. For more journeys into the unknown corners of our world, subscribe and join us next time. Remember, the greatest stories are often those still being unearthed, waiting patiently for the right moment and the right curious mind to bring them back into the light.